Welcome back to Talking Shit, presented by Colitis Unfiltered. My name is Frank Tabering, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Kinsey, who got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis at age 15 in Saratoga Springs, Utah. Kinsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you today, and what I usually like to do is start off by setting the context of your IBD journey. So in a few sentences, if you don't mind just telling us where you got diagnosed, when you got diagnosed, and also how your IBD journey evolved until today.
Yeah, of course. So when I was 14, my mom did a big move. So we moved about an hour away from where I had grown up for most of my life. And around that same time, I started experiencing like stomach pain, fatigue, weight loss, bloody stool, that kind of stuff. And I have always been an anxious kid, so they kind of assumed it was anxiety. So between when I first started having symptoms to my actual diagnosis was about a year. When I was 15 years old, they did a colonoscopy and they saw the colitis, and that is when I got diagnosed.
And so when you saw a doctor for the first time, like, did they not inquire any further, or they said, like, they just said it was anxiety and nobody was sort of like interested in figuring out exactly why you had, let's say, the diarrhea and the typical symptoms of colitis?
Yeah, so I saw like a primary care pediatrician, and they saw with my history of anxiety and with the big life changes, they assumed it was that. And the actual bloody stool didn't start happening towards the end of that year mark.
And so when you got diagnosed with colitis, had you ever heard of the term before? Was it completely new? Did your doctor explain what it was, and what went through your mind at that stage?
So I have a family history. My aunt had ulcerative colitis, and then my dad has at least 2 cousins with Crohn's that he knows of. So I did have a pretty good understanding of what it was. My aunt actually, when I first started getting sick, she was like, I think it might be colitis, but it did take a while to get the diagnosis. And then I remember, I think my doctor gave me like a pamphlet or something of like, this is what it is. I don't remember that much of him like actually explaining what it is, but I also was still like coming out of anesthesia, so I'm not sure.
And so having a family history of IBD, did it scare you to be diagnosed with colitis as well? Or did you feel like you were potentially better prepared for a life with the disease?
I did feel a little scared to be diagnosed with it because I had a very basic, I think it's where people just use the bathroom a lot. I didn't really understand what all it entailed. I remember that like my parents and my aunt were actually more upset about it than I was. And I think that's just because they kind of knew more about what it was. Once I figured out what it was, I definitely had like a mourning period where I was a little bit like bummed about it.
And so from the moment that you were diagnosed to today, how did your journey with colitis evolve? Take us a little bit about what happened, since diagnosis to today.
Yeah, so they pretty quickly started me on Remicade or infliximab, and I was on that for about a year and a half, and then I started having like breakthrough flare-ups, and the efficacy of the drug started working less and less. And towards the end of the Remicade, I ended up getting admitted for a couple days for a flare-up, and they did a scope, and they saw that I had a lot of active disease, so they decided it wasn't working anymore. And so at that point, they decided to switch me to Stelara. So I was on Stelara for a little bit. And then after the Stelara, I went through a phase where I would try medication for a couple of months and then it would stop working. So I was on Stelara, and then I was on Entyvio, and then I did Rinvoq, and then I did Velsipity. And by then I had already failed like 5 or 6 drugs within 3 years. And I still had active inflammation, even being on prednisone and biologics. So they decided that it was time to do a total colectomy and get a J pouch. So I had that done in August of last year. which was originally the 3-part surgery, which was supposed to take place over the course of about 9 months. But due to being on long-term prednisone, I didn't heal well from the surgeries. So I had all 3 parts of my surgery in 3 months. And then I had 2 additional surgeries where I got a JP drain placed and that got infected. So then I got a wound vac placed. And then it took me a while to kind of heal from that. And then now I am on Xeljanz to treat, I have Colitis. So I'm trying to treat that, but I haven't had any major surgeries for a while. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Right. Yeah. No, that's quite the journey. And so when you had the surgery, you were how old?
18.
18. So between diagnosis and surgery, basically 3 years elapsed, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about living with colitis for 3 years, especially during an age that is kind of crucial, right? I mean, you were young. And as young people during those teenage years, we're used to doing different things than suffering typically, right? So I'm interested to hear how you navigated that, especially also being around other kids that most likely didn't really understand what you were going through, right?
Yeah. So that was basically throughout high school, that time frame. I would have good times and bad times, like times where my medication had it somewhat controlled. I never fully got into remission, and then I'd have like flare times. I did have a 504 plan in place that helps teachers and staff kind of understand what was going on. And I'm a pretty open book, so all my close friends did know about my disease, and they were also pretty understanding. They didn't like understand in depth what the disease was, but they did understand that I might be a little bit more tired than other teenagers my age. I may need to stay close to a bathroom, that kind of stuff. So I think I had a pretty good support system, which really helped me get through it.
And so now that you've had the surgeries, how are you feeling today?
I have my good days and my bad days for sure. I'd say with the chronic colitis, that has been a little bit of a struggle to get that figured out. I was on Entyvio for a couple months earlier this year, and that stopped working. So I'm still in the phase of Xeljanz where we're waiting to see if it will work or not. I just started it not too long ago. So I do struggle with a lot of chronic fatigue. I definitely am a napper. That has been a little bit difficult to navigate just because I am a college student and I work as well. So it's just struggling to get that. But I'd say I feel well enough to get through the day. So
Typically, when I speak to IBD patients who've had surgeries, the consensus is that surgery has really given them their life back, right? And even though the struggles continue with IBD because it's not necessarily a cure either, they do feel better. They do get to enjoy life more. Does the same thing apply to you?
I would say I have ups and downs. When I can get my colitis under control, I definitely do have, I do feel like it did give me my life back. But when I'm dealing with like active flares of colitis, I do struggle a little bit more. I would say I don't struggle as badly as I did before having the surgery. So in a sense, yes, it was helpful for me. And my goal is to eventually get to that point where I'm like, it fully gave me my life back.
But you're not there yet.
Not quite, but
Not quite.
I'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll absolutely get there, 100%. Now, throughout your journey, did you have like one specialist, one gastroenterologist that you've worked with over the years, or did you have several? Because I always think that it's quite important for people with IBD to have a strong relationship with their doctors, right? How was that for you, navigating through treatments, failing treatments, surgery? Did you have that kind of a specialist? And what is your relationship with your doctor today?
Yeah, so when I first got diagnosed, I saw a pediatric gastroenterologist, and I saw him for about 2 years. And once I failed Remicade, well, let me rephrase, when Remicade failed me, because IBD patients, we don't fail our meds, they fail us. But
Exactly.
once Remicade stopped working, he was like, well, I can either do surgery or we can refer you to somebody else. I'm not sure what to do with you anymore. So I got referred to a complex IBD center, which I still go to. It's still pediatric, but now I have a full team that helps me. I have my gastroenterologist, I have a colorectal NP, a colorectal surgeon, a dietitian, social worker, and IBD nurses. So I have a very well-rounded team and I have a very good relationship with my team.
And in what ways is your team supporting you as someone who has had surgery, right? Because yes, you're dealing with fatigue. IBD is not over, but not having a colon has its challenges by itself. In what way are they supporting you, educating you, helping you along in that aspect of your condition right now?
They are very good about getting back to me quickly, which I appreciate. And they're good at letting me know like what could be causing some of my like symptoms that I have going on. And I feel like they always are there for me to answer questions, even if I think like, oh my God, I don't know if I want to ask that. That's kind of a silly question. They always answer and don't make me feel like it's a dumb question. So they've been very supportive in that sense. And I have a good relationship with my team. I feel like they care about me as a person and not just a patient. And they care more than just my IBD. They care about my, like, every aspect of my life. And I've really
Mm-hmm.
appreciated that from them.
Yeah, that's great to have. So we talked about this already. You were quite young where you diagnosed. You're still young, but you've been on this journey for enough years to at least see your life change. If you look back at IBD specifically, the colitis, the surgeries, how has this changed you as a person, do you think?
I would say IBD has definitely made me a more strong, resilient person, and it's helped me have more empathy for others. I have learned that I can do hard things. I tell myself that all the time. That's kind of my mantra. If I tell myself I can do hard things and then I do whatever it is I need to get done, it gives me more of a sense of accomplishment. So that has been very helpful for me. But it has helped me learn how to advocate for myself and advocate for others as well.
And so where do you take the courage from to sort of keep fighting?
I would love to become an IBD nurse practitioner someday and be able to like help other people who have dealt with similar things that I have dealt with. So remembering my why has been very helpful for me. Like, why do I want to get out of bed? Why am I going to work? Why am I showing up to school? If I remember my why, then that is what has helped me continue to show up every day for things.
And you mentioned earlier that you were pretty open about your disease with your friends, right? With your family. And you and we connected on Instagram, and I think you're a pretty open person on there as well, on TikTok as well. So what would your message be to young people that are going through a similar journey than you have, especially sort of, facing surgeries or just having surgeries? What would you tell them to, especially when they're afraid, right? Because when I speak to people and the word surgery pops up, fear is the first thing that pops into their minds, right? This uncertainty. So as somebody who went through this, what's your message to those people?
I would tell them that it's going to be okay. You are stronger than you think and give yourself credit for. We can't obviously choose to have the surgery, but we can choose how we respond to these situations that arise in our lives. We can either go through it with a like negative, pessimistic attitude, which there is a time and place for that. I definitely am not positive all the time. I have my moments. But I feel like you can either be sick and negative or sick and positive, and one feels a lot better than the other. And it's easy to be scared for getting surgeries and stuff like that, and that's totally understandable to feel that way. But if you think about it, nobody can predict what's going to happen in their lives. So, kind of sitting around and thinking, when's my next flare? When's my next surgery? That kind of stuff, you can kind of scare yourself into a spiral. But if you just think about nobody knows what's happening and nobody knows what's going to happen in their future as well, it kind of helps.
Looking at the content that you produce, most of it is tied to we can say specific sense of humor, right? Is that something that you developed over the years, or have you always been the kind of person with a little bit more of a dry sense of humor?
I would definitely say I've always kind of had a dry sense of humor. That's very much how my family is. We joke with each other all the time. We're sarcastic, that kind of stuff. And using humor to cope in like tough situations has proven to be very helpful for myself. And I hope that it can help other people relate to situations. I try to post things that I hope one person will relate to and think, oh, at least I'm not the only one that feels like that. So that's kind of my goal with posting content.
Sarcasm, I can definitely relate to that. So that's why your content speaks to me pretty easily. So you say that this sense of humor is present in your family as well.
Hmm.
Because you went through this during a crucial period, the teenage years essentially. Looking back, do you feel that your family, and also with the history of IBD, did they baby you through this in a sense, or what was the type of support like that they gave you?
I would definitely say they did not baby me. We have a lot of family history of different autoimmune diseases and kind of think of it like everyone has their thing that they struggle with. They were there to support me, like going to appointments with me, or when I needed a down day, like watching movies with me, that kind of stuff. They've been very supportive in that aspect. And I'd say with talking about my symptoms and how I feel and stuff, I ironically most of the time keep it to myself except for social media. I also see a therapist as well, which has been very helpful for me, but I don't love to, I don't know, like complain about the way that I'm feeling to my family
Mm.
all the time. Because if I told them every time I didn't feel well, that would be all the time every day. So I only tell them if it's something like pretty dramatic or big going on.
Mm. And I imagine, so if you have family members that are suffering from the same or similar conditions, there's sometimes a risk that they, I don't know, may look at your symptoms or may look at your condition or mood and say, hey, I went through this, or your aunt went through this, so suck it up, right? Toughen up. Did you feel any of that as well? Or did they just really treat you and your colitis as you are your person with your own disease and you're going to go through it the way you're going through it?
They definitely did the second option with that. They never told me like to tough it up and stuff. I'm the only one in my family who's had surgeries for my IBD, so I I do talk to my aunt a lot about like we complain to each other and it's pretty great, and I think it's a
Yeah.
good way to vent. But they definitely don't tell me to like suck it up and stuff. They've been really good about that. In high school, I'd have days where I'd be like, I'm too tired to go to school and stuff like that. And they would be like, we'll try to go and see if you can get feeling better. So they definitely encouraged me to try to do things, which I do appreciate because if they didn't do that, I probably would have just never gone to school. So that was good. There was like good gentle nudging, but never like suck it up energy, I guess.
Yeah. So no real comparisons, but more
Mm-mm.
lifting each other up, right? And facing similar
Yes.
challenges. And that's
Yeah.
really great. So growing up in a family with a lot of autoimmune diseases, especially also IBD, according to you, what do you think are some major misconceptions about colitis or Crohn's out there today?
One of my biggest ones is like IBS and IBD are the same thing. They are definitely not the same thing. Another one that I have is that some people think Crohn's is worse than colitis, and I think that's too broad of a statement to make because I think IBD affects every individual person differently. And there's different severities of both diseases with different like comorbidities of both diseases. So flat out saying one is worse than the other, I don't think is an accurate statement to make. Those are kind of my two main ones that I have.
That's a really good one, actually. And then I think, if you don't mind me adding, the other one is that surgery definitely does not cure
Yes.
IBD, right?
Oh,
I mean,
Mhm.
you're still resting it in a way, even though that your life is improving. It's not over, the fight. Now, if you go back to being 15 years old and you're sitting in the doctor's office and he or she just told you that you have ulcerative colitis, if you could speak to yourself on that day, what would you say?
I would just say everything's gonna be okay and everything's gonna happen the way it's meant to. Not to be too scared, and life isn't over, it's just starting. And IBD isn't all negative, that I got a lot of positive things out of IBD. I've gotten a lot of connections to other people. I've had a lot of personal self-growth, so it's not all terrible. I'd probably tell myself that.
And that's a really good transition to my next question is, where you are now, despite your struggles, I'm sure that IBD has brought you these positive aspects. Aside from what you just mentioned, how else do you think that this disease has made you a better person and also has enriched your life in a way?
It has definitely taught me empathy, and I think part of the empathy I've learned is also from working on the other side in the medical field, realizing a lot of people have hidden struggles that they don't talk about and you don't know that they're going through, but they are going through it and they still show up every day. IBD is an invisible disease for the most part, so it can be hard at sometimes to express the struggles. And I think that's part of why like being online is important, at least for me, to advocate to make IBD a little bit more visible. So that would kind of be the main things.
And that's kind of a hopeful statement. And I always like to end the show with a little bit of hope. And the question that I would like to ask, even though it might be difficult to answer, but I still think that everybody sort of has their own opinion or their own wishes. Do you think that we will see a cure to IBD in our lifetime?
I definitely hope so. I know the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation is doing a lot to get towards that. They have a lot of different events. They have the Take Steps event, like different charities. And I know there's more research happening every day, and we're getting closer, and they're coming out with more and more biologics that can put people into more of a remission state. So I am hopeful that we will see a cure in my lifetime, but I am not 100% sure because there's a lot of other diseases that have been looking for cures for a long time as well. So I don't know, but I hope so.
Yeah, science is important, but you mentioned it. I think community support is equally important, especially for the mental aspect of those suffering through Crohn's and colitis. So Kinsey, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and the only thing I can tell you is, keep fighting and also keep bringing that sarcasm to your online content. I'm sure there's a lot of other people, but just besides me out there, who appreciate that as well. And I wish you nothing but the best on your continuing IBD journey.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Talking Shit, presented by Colitis Unfiltered. I'm Frank Tabering, and if this hit home or hit your gut, do us a favor, subscribe to the show, and follow us at Colitis Unfiltered on YouTube, Substack, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and Reddit. We'll see you soon for more inspiring stories from the bathroom floor.